Picture this. A retired teacher in Ohio opens her investment account on a Monday morning, expecting to see the usual numbers she's been watching for months, and suddenly her screen shows silver at $90 per ounce. Her hands shake as she refreshes the page 3 times, convinced it's a glitch. Meanwhile, in a towering glass building in Lower Manhattan, a banker stares at the same screen with a completely different emotion: absolute panic. His institution is short 40 million ounces of silver, and the losses are mounting by the second. This isn't fiction. This is happening right now, and what unfolds in the next few minutes will determine whether you are positioned to profit from the greatest wealth transfer in precious metals history, or left watching from the sidelines as generational fortunes are made and lost. The silver market just crossed a threshold that many analysts thought impossible just months ago. At $90 per ounce, silver has shattered every resistance level, demolished bearish predictions, and exposed a vulnerability in the banking system that runs deeper than most people ever imagined. But here's what the mainstream media isn't telling you. This explosive move isn't random, it isn't temporary, and it definitely isn't over. The relentless strikes by major banking institutions against silver prices have finally backfired in the most spectacular fashion, creating a perfect storm that's sending shockwaves through global financial markets. I hope you're doing well, and if you like my video, please subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon for more video notifications, because what I'm about to reveal will change everything you thought you knew about silver, banking manipulation, and where your money should be right now. For decades, the silver market has been the battlefield where individual investors clash with some of the most powerful financial institutions on the planet. These banks haven't just been passive participants, they've been actively shorting silver, betting billions that prices would fall, using complex derivatives and paper contracts to suppress the true value of physical metal. The strategy was simple and had worked for years. Flood the futures market with paper silver contracts, create artificial supply that doesn't actually exist in physical form, drive down prices, profit from the decline, or rinse and repeat. But something fundamental has changed. The physical silver market has completely decoupled from the paper market. And when reality finally crashes into fantasy, the results are explosive. Let's break down exactly what happened and why banks are now trapped in a position they can't escape. The global silver supply chain has been tightening for years, with industrial demand consuming more silver than mines can produce. Electric vehicles, solar panels, electronics, medical equipment, every single one of these booming sectors requires silver and lots of it. Unlike gold, which sits in vaults and serves primarily as a store of value, silver gets consumed, used up, and incorporated into products that don't return that silver to the market. Add to this the growing number of retail investors who've woken up to the manipulation game and started buying physical silver in unprecedented quantities, and you have a supply crisis that no amount of paper contracts can solve. The banking institutions made a catastrophic miscalculation. They assumed that the paper market would always control price discovery, that they could continue printing silver contracts forever without anyone demanding physical delivery. But the squeeze has begun, and it's relentless. When silver was trading at $25 per ounce, these banks doubled down on their short positions, convinced they could crush any rally. At $35, they added even more shorts, throwing good money after bad. At $50, the first cracks appeared as smaller institutions started covering their positions at massive losses. At $70, panic set in. And now at $90, we are witnessing financial carnage on a scale that makes the GameStop short squeeze look like a minor hiccup. Here's the mathematical reality that has banks in a death grip. Many of these institutions are short hundreds of millions of ounces of silver that simply doesn't exist in available inventory. The COMEX vaults, where futures contracts are supposedly backed by physical metal, have been bleeding inventory for months. Every time a contract holder demands physical delivery instead of cash settlement, the available silver shrinks further. It's a game of musical chairs, and the music is about to stop. When these banks try to cover their short positions by buying silver to close out their bets, they drive the price higher with every purchase, which increases their losses on remaining short positions, forcing them to buy even more, which drives prices even higher. This feedback loop, this vicious cycle, is exactly what's propelling silver toward $100 and potentially far beyond. The global implications extend far beyond just the silver market. These are not small regional banks holding these massive short positions. These are systemically important financial institutions whose collapse could trigger contagion across the entire banking sector. Remember 2008? The derivative exposure that nearly brought down the global financial system was estimated at around $600 trillion. The precious metals derivative market is a significant component of that exposure, and silver is where the cracks are appearing first. When one major bank fails to meet margin calls on their silver shorts, the counterparty risk spreads like wildfire. Other banks who lent to that institution suddenly face losses, credit freezes up, liquidity vanishes, and before you know it, we're staring at another financial crisis. But this time, the central banks have already fired most of their ammunition fighting inflation and dealing with massive sovereign debt loads. Now let's talk about what this means for you, the individual investor, because this is where the opportunity exists. Physical silver at $90 is still dramatically undervalued compared to its historical ratio with gold. For most of human history, the gold to silver ratio hovered around 15 to 1, meaning 15 ounces of silver equaled 1 ounce of gold. That ratio made sense because there's approximately 15 times more silver in the earth as crust than gold. Today, even with silver at $90 and gold around $2,500, that ratio sits at nearly 28 to 1. If silver were to return to its historical ratio, we'd be looking at prices north of $160 per ounce. And that's using conservative assumptions that don't account for the massive industrial demand that didn't exist in previous centuries. The relentless nature of these banker strikes against silver has created a coiled spring that is now unleashing decades of pent-up price suppression. Every dollar silver climbs from here represents not just current market dynamics, but also the unwinding of years of artificial price manipulation. Technical analysts are pointing to resistance levels at $100, $125, and $150. But in a true short squeeze scenario, traditional technical analysis goes out the window. Prices can overshoot to levels that seem irrational because the buying is not driven by fundamental value assessments. It's driven by survival instinct as short sellers desperately try to close positions before they're completely wiped out. The smart money has already positioned itself. Billionaire investors, family offices, and sovereign wealth funds have been accumulating physical silver for months, quietly buying every dip and taking delivery of actual metal rather than holding paper promises. They understand something that the general public is only now beginning to grasp. In a world of infinite money printing, massive government debts, and teetering financial institutions, hard assets with genuine scarcity and industrial utility represent the ultimate safe haven. Silver offers something unique. It is both a monetary metal with thousands of years of history, as currency and an indispensable industrial commodity that the modern economy cannot function without. Consider the supply-demand fundamentals beyond just the short squeeze. Global silver mine production has been essentially flat or declining for years, while demand continues to surge. The push for green energy alone is set to consume unprecedented quantities of silver, with solar panel installations projected to require hundreds of millions of ounces annually. Electric vehicles use significantly more silver than traditional cars, and as EV adoption accelerates, that demand becomes structural and permanent. The 5G build-out, the expansion of artificial intelligence data centers, advances in medical technology, all of these trends point to inexorably rising industrial demand for a metal that is already in deficit. What makes the current situation even more extraordinary is the retail investor awakening. Millions of ordinary people have educated themselves about monetary history, inflation, and the mechanics of price suppression in precious metals markets. They're buying silver coins, bars, and rounds directly from dealers, removing physical metal from the market permanently. This grassroots movement represents a decentralized force that banks cannot control or manipulate the way they can with paper contracts. When an investor buys a silver eagle coin and stores it in their safe, that ounce is gone from the available supply, period. Multiply that by millions of investors worldwide, and you create a supply squeeze that no amount of paper contract manipulation can overcome. The endgame for this relentless banker strike situation has several possible scenarios, none of them pleasant for the institutions caught on the wrong side of the trade. In the best case scenario for banks, governments, or central banks intervene with some form of bailout or rule change that allows them to settle contracts in cash at artificially low prices, essentially changing the rules mid-game to prevent complete collapse. This would be hugely controversial and would likely accelerate the flight to physical precious metals as trust in paper markets evaporates. The worst-case scenario involves cascading defaults, banks going under, and a complete restructuring of the precious metals markets that could take years to resolve while silver prices reach truly astronomical levels due to the chaos and uncertainty. What's absolutely critical for anyone watching this unfold is understanding the difference between paper silver and physical silver. Exchange-traded funds, mining stocks, futures contracts, these all have their place in a diversified precious metal strategy. But they also carry counterparty risk. When banks are failing and markets are in turmoil, you want actual metal you can hold, store, and control. The premiums on physical silver have already spiked dramatically as dealers struggle to source inventory to meet demand, and those premiums will likely go much higher as the squeeze intensifies. Getting your hands on physical silver now, even at $90, may look like genius positioning 6 months from now when prices have doubled again and physical premiums have added another 30% on top of spot prices. The $90 threshold represents more than just a price milestone. It represents a psychological breaking point where the mainstream can no longer ignore what's happening in silver. News coverage will increase, retail FOMO will kick in, and the final parabolic phase of this move could make the current rally look tame by comparison. History shows us that when commodities enter true mania phases driven by short squeezes and supply shortages, prices can overshoot rational valuations by enormous margins before eventually settling back to reality. We saw it in oil. We saw it in lumber. We've seen it in countless other markets. But silver is different because of its dual nature as both money and commodity, and because the entities caught short are the very banks that society depends on for financial stability. This is not just a market event, it's a potential systemic crisis that could reshape the entire financial landscape. And if you found this information valuable, make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on because the developments in this story are happening fast, and you need to stay informed to protect and grow your wealth in these unprecedented times.